My name is Tirawat. I'm 81 years old, and I need to tell you something that took me most of my life to admit. The greatest damage to my peace did not always come from tragedy. It did not always come from loss, betrayal, money, illness, or the behavior of other people. Much of it came from habits, quiet habits, repeated habits, habits so normal to me that I did not even see them as habits. I thought they were my personality, my seriousness, my discipline, my way of surviving. But they were doing something else. They were slowly eating away at my inner peace while I was busy blaming the world. And when I finally saw them clearly, I felt two things at once: grief for how long I had lived under their power, and relief that peace had not abandoned me. I had been feeding what pushed it away. I was born in northern Thailand, in a village where life taught us to endure before it taught us to reflect. We learned work. We learned duty. We learned silence. We learned to carry pain without language. Nobody sat down with me as a boy and explained how inner suffering gets built. Nobody said that what you repeat inside yourself becomes the shape of your life. So I grew up assuming that if my peace was disturbed, the disturbance must be coming from outside. And of course, sometimes it was. Life can be hard. People can wound you. Bodies can fail. Time can take away what you love. But what I did not understand then was that I was helping my own suffering continue in ways I could not yet recognize. When I entered the monastery, I believed I was stepping into a life of peace, and in some ways I was. The temple gave me discipline, rhythm, silence, and teachings that would slowly save me. But before they saved me, they exposed me. The silence of monastic life showed me how much movement there was in me, not only in my thoughts but in my habits, the way I reacted, the way I judged, the way I replayed, the way I feared, the way I held on. At first I thought all I needed was better meditation, more discipline, more control. But the years taught me something much humbler. Peace is often not destroyed by one dramatic event. It is quietly damaged by what you do every day inside yourself. The first habit that secretly destroyed my peace was replaying what had already ended. A conversation, a criticism, a mistake, a moment of embarrassment, a small conflict. I would take something that had already passed and keep it alive in my mind until it became larger than it ever was in reality. You see, the event was often not what exhausted me. It was the repetition. I did not simply remember. I re-entered. I relived. I rejudged. I refelt. A small thing could become a week of unrest because I kept feeding it long after life had moved on. At the time, I called this reflection. It was not reflection. It was captivity. And here's what I didn't understand then. The mind does not know the difference between a wound that is current and a wound you keep reopening. The body reacts. The chest tightens. The sleep becomes restless. The breath becomes shallow. And all because I would not let a finished thing stay finished. This habit stole more peace from me than I care to admit. It took years before I understood that replaying is not loyalty to truth. It is resistance to release. The second habit was taking everything personally. This one is very dangerous because it feels so natural. Someone is quiet, and the mind says it is about me. Someone seems distant, and the mind says I have done something wrong. Someone changes, and the mind says I am being left behind. I lived like this for many years, not always visibly. Sometimes I looked composed, but inside my peace was at the mercy of tones, pauses, delays, and expressions. If another person had inner weather, I often experienced it as if it were a verdict on me. That is an exhausting way to live. It means your inner state is always waiting for the world to behave in exactly the right way before it can settle. What most people don't realize is that much of what hurts them is not what others actually do. It is what their own mind makes those actions mean. A silence becomes rejection. A correction becomes humiliation. A disagreement becomes disrespect. A delay becomes abandonment. I know this because I lived inside these interpretations. I suffered many things that were never truly said, never truly intended, never truly there in the way my mind constructed them. Taking things personally made my life smaller and my heart much heavier. The third habit that damaged my peace was speaking to myself with cruelty. This one hurts me to remember because I spent so many years believing harshness was useful. If I was restless, I scolded myself. If I was tired, I called myself weak. If fear appeared, I treated it as failure. If old pain rose, I judged my lack of progress. I thought this internal severity would make me stronger, purer, more disciplined. But a mind under constant attack cannot rest. A heart that is never met with gentleness cannot trust stillness. I was creating an atmosphere inside myself where peace had no room to land. You know what surprised me most? The more severe I became with myself, the more unstable my inner world felt. I thought harshness would lead to purity. It led to tension. I thought judgment would sharpen me. It made me brittle. And because this inner voice had been with me for so long, I mistook it for wisdom. It was not wisdom. It was fear using my own voice to keep me under pressure. The fourth habit was comparing my inner life to the outer appearance of others. This one is more poisonous than many people realize. I would look at another monk sitting still and assume his mind was still. I would hear someone speak calmly and assume their heart was free. I would see another person move through life without obvious struggle and assume they had reached a peace I was still too flawed to find. Comparison is cruel because it makes your own humanity look like failure. It makes ordinary struggle feel like shame. And it blinds you to the simple truth that every human being carries invisible battles. I spent many years thinking I was behind, less pure, less steady, less spiritually mature than others. Some of this came from humility. Much of it came from comparison. And comparison robbed me twice. First, it took away gratitude for my actual path. Then it made me feel separated from other people by pain that was not as unique as I imagined. Once I understood how much of that suffering was built through comparison, I began to loosen that habit. Peace returned not because I suddenly became superior, but because I stopped measuring my insides against the surface of other people's lives. The fifth habit was resisting what was already here. This one was perhaps the most hidden of all. Something painful would happen, and rather than feel it clearly, I would start fighting the fact that it had happened. Not this, not now, not me, this should not be. That resistance created a second layer of suffering. The event was the first pain. My argument with the event was the second. I did this with loss, with aging, with disappointment, with physical discomfort, with misunderstanding, with change. I thought resistance was strength. It was not. It was friction. It was me making the road harder by digging my heels into the ground. This was especially painful as I grew older. Aging itself is a teacher of this truth. The body changes, energy changes, roles change, relationships change. If you resist each one as if life were betraying you, old age becomes a battlefield. And I turned it into one more often than I like to admit. The day I saw that peace was being damaged not only by what life was doing, but by my refusal to let life do what life does, something softened in me. The sixth habit that secretly destroyed my peace was over-identifying with my thoughts and emotions. If fear came, I became the fear. If sadness came, I became the sadness. If agitation appeared, I believed I had lost all inner balance. I did not yet know how to say, fear is here, instead of, I am fear. I did not know how to witness. I only knew how to merge. This gave every passing mental event tremendous power. It meant my peace depended on the complete absence of difficult thoughts, which is impossible for a human being. I was asking the mind to stop being a mind before I would allow myself to rest. And this is where everything changed. Over time, practice taught me to see. A thought is a movement, not an identity. A feeling is weather, not a final truth. Once that became real, the inner storms did not vanish, but they stopped defining me in the same way. That changed everything. Because peace does not require the total disappearance of thought. It requires less obedience to thought. The seventh habit was never truly stopping. Even in stillness, I was moving inwardly, thinking, evaluating, anticipating, comparing, fixing. Outwardly, I looked calm. Inwardly, I was exhausting myself. This was perhaps the most invisible habit of all. A person can be in a temple, in silence, in prayer, and still be far away from peace because the inner machinery never pauses. I had made movement into identity. If I was not mentally doing something, I felt unsafe. This meant silence itself became uncomfortable. Presence became difficult. Simplicity felt almost suspicious. What most people don't realize is that peace is not only pushed away by crisis, it is slowly worn down by these very ordinary patterns. Replaying, personalizing, self-attack, comparison, resistance, identification, restlessness. These habits are like tiny holes in a vessel. Day after day, they leak your strength. And because the damage is gradual, you often do not notice until you are already very far from yourself. There was a period in my 70s when all of this became painfully clear. I was waking up tired, not only in body and spirit. My thoughts felt crowded. My reactions felt too fast. My prayer felt effortful. My patience was thinner. And I finally asked a question I should have asked much earlier. Not why is life disturbing my peace, but what am I doing every day that keeps peace from staying? That question was humbling, but it was also a doorway. Because once I stopped looking only outside, I could begin to take responsibility for the habits inside that were shaping my suffering. You see, seeing your habits clearly is already a kind of liberation. A pattern remains powerful while it is invisible. Once it is seen, it may still return, but it returns without complete secrecy. That matters. It changes the relationship, and relationship is everything. If these words are helping you recognize something in yourself, maybe this is the right moment to stay close to this space. Sometimes one hidden pattern, once named honestly, loosens years of suffering. If this is touching something true in you, stay with me. At 81, I still have a mind. I still have difficult days. I still feel things deeply. But these habits no longer rule me in the same silent way. I see them earlier. I interrupt them sooner. I trust them less. And because of that, there is more room in me now. More room for breath. More room for patience. More room for ordinary peace. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 habits you recognize most strongly in yourself right now. Maybe it is replaying. Maybe self-criticism. Maybe comparison. Maybe making everything personal. Whatever it is, naming it matters. And if this message gave you something useful today, subscribe and leave a like so these words can reach another person whose peace has been quietly leaking through patterns they did not yet know how to see.